that Usul al-Fiqh provides the fiqh. What does fiqh do? Halal, haram, mustahab, mubah. Fiqh tells us what is the ruling. Usul al-Fiqh is the ingredients. Fiqh is what you make, what you eat. I like to tell people, if you watch football, fiqh are the players, Usul al-Fiqh is the referee. I can give an example of ambiguity quickly before we continue. You ever, buy something and you think you know how to use it, and you start to try to use it and you can't, and then you look at the instructions and it says, put the plug in its place. What does that mean? So the text is real, but the meaning is what? Ambiguous. This happens all the time. If you're married, this happens between you and your spouse at least 300 million times every hour. What do you mean? What? Where do you want to eat? I don't know, somewhere. Somewhere that's much better. How are you going to solve that? Brothers, just be quiet. Don't say nothing. Sukut, tawaqquf, bab tawaqquf. No, but you start, that's istidlal. But what are you feeling like, honey? Well, I had fatoush last night. Okay, Lebanese is out. So this is called sabr wa taqsim and usul al-fiqh. Okay, Lebanese is out. And I had kushri yesterday. Okay, Masri is out. I really feel like spicy. Tasty? So now this is what a faqih is doing. This is what usul al-fiqh does. It negotiates the ambiguous until you come to a definitive conclusion. And then she'll say, I want hamburgers. Khalas. Iqrar al-sayr al-adil. We have a qaida for that. To admit is the head of all evidence. Let's quickly look at some of the components of usul al-fiqh if you wanted to sort of break it down into 4 parts. Number 1, what constitutes an evidence? What can I use for this critical and constructive thinking? What can I use to bring light into the world? What are the rules for using those things? So it's not only the sources, how to use it. Most of the time I see people like the meme that there'll be no Hajj now and it's the end of time. The problem, you tell people that's wrong, they're like, but it's in Bukhari. That's not the problem. The problem isn't the usul. The problem is you don't know how to use it. So the second component of usul al-fiqh is, how do I employ these things correctly? The methodology. Because without that, I could use verses. The Khawarij, they use verses. People who kill Shias, they use verses. The Fatimiyya, they killed 300 Maliki Jews in one day in Egypt. They had their verses. People can use verses right there. ISIS, qala Allah, qala Rasulullah. That's not the issue. Liberal Muslims that are off, there's no deen left, as Shatibi says, you stretch it to the point where there's nothing left anymore. Qala Allah, qala Rasulullah. So the problem isn't the evidences. Wallahi, one time there was a brother who smoked a weed in college. I said, man, you need to fear Allah. He said, well, the religion's ease, brother. Prophet Sallallahu, he said, religion's ease. I was like, I don't know. I think that's not the ease he meant, bro. So anyone can use an evidence, but how are we employing it? And that's really the guts of it. He said, loop, and the mastar of everything is how. Kayfiyat. التنفيذ واستدلال هذه النصوص هذه الأصول. How do I use those roots? Then what are the qualifications needed to do? What do I need to study to do that? And then finally, what is the relationship then between the learned and the unlearned? Right? Because Islam is very worried about a hierarchical religious authority that's beyond reproach. That's not healthy. Allah says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people who know if you don't know. It doesn't mean don't just ask them, but also after the answer, you can continue to ask. Okay, but what does that mean? Are you sure? That's a healthy thing. قَدْ سَمِعَ اللَّهُ قَوْلَ الَّتِي تُجَادِلُكَ فِي. The woman came and argued with the Messenger of Allah. Alayhi salam, Allah recorded it. He didn't censor her. We have an axiom in usul al-fiqh, because maybe someone says it's not allowed to argue with your teacher. You can say, قَدْ سَمِعَ اللَّهُ قَوْلَ الَّتِي تُجَادِلُكَ فِي زَوْجِهَا. She argued with the Messenger of Allah alayhi salam about her husband. We have an axiom in usul al-fiqh. لا يجوز تأخر البيان بوجود الحاجة. If something haram happens, the Sharia will address it immediately. If what she was doing was haram, the second verse would say, وَلَا يَجُوزُ لَهَا أَن تُجَادِلَكَ فِي زَوْجِهَا. But it doesn't say that. So that means even to ask the Messenger of Allah and to probe and engage him for the sake of learning is what? Allowed. So here's the methodology that you ask. I like to tell people, if you've ever done web design, the back end is usul al-fiqh. The front end is fiqh. What's happening in the back end? The ingredients of the recipe. Here's the maqluba, how you make it. That's how you make it. That's usul fiqh. So 4 components. Knowing what it constitutes a sound evidence. Number 2, how to use that evidence. Number 3, what are the academic qualifications I should have in order to do that? And number 4, the relationship between the non-trained and the trained. Adab al-mufti wal-mustafti. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned weed, marijuana a couple times, and this is an issue that is kind of in my face almost on a daily basis, and it's something that I don't know how to deal with. I have a youth institute, and so I am dealing with young people from across the country, and the majority of them are Muslim, and we're literally losing our youth to marijuana, among other
Absolutely
issues.
But thanks for being on the front lines for them. That's an important thing.
Yep, because it's an issue where I see the issue in a particular way, and it's very, when I give my opinion, I'm not a sheikh, I'm not a faqih, I don't give rulings or anything, but I'm against it. I'm opposed to it, vehemently opposed to it, but they come to me with all these reasonings and like, oh, but, this is what we're dealing with, and, depression and anxiety and sleeplessness, and we can't eat, and blah, 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 and there's like a million excuses.
Right.
Who am I to tell them that, that their excuses are not legitimate? So I would really, and this might not be the platform of this, but I really need to know, I would love to know, like, if there's the...
What's the answer to the ambiguous situation? Here we go.
I don't want to say your opinion, because... I know, qala Allah, qala Rasul, that's like the opinion, but has there been ijtihad on the issue, and have you done your research?
We'll get to this. We'll get at the end, ask me this again. Okay. Hopefully by the time we finish, we have just about 10 to 15 minutes to kind of go over what is usul al-fiqh. That's where I was asked sort of to discuss, and then we can address that, inshallah. So I want you to remember 4 ingredients of usul al-fiqh. معرفة الدلائل أو أدلة إجمالا. What are the evidences? Number 2, كيفية استفادة منها. كيف استفاد. How do you use the evidences to benefit? Look at the language. You use it in English. استفاد means how do I bring فائدة? كيف أتي الفائدة. The فائدة doesn't mean necessarily it's going to be permissible, right? Like in this situation, haram, but that's فائدة in that because there's benefit in that. So istifad doesn't mean just like everything's fine, everything's great. It could also mean, no, it's not allowed. Allah said the Prophet forbid them what's filthy. What he permits is good and pure. And the third, وحال المستفid. What is the conditions of the one who is the mustafid? The one that's seeking benefit and bringing benefit to people. And the fourth, وحال المستفاد. What's the condition of the benefiter? And it's a questioner. So, before we get started, a crucial function of usul al-fiqh is to identify acceptable proofs. The first component, this definition I gave you, ma'rifatu adilla ijmaliyya wa kayfiyat istifadati minha wa al-mustafid, is the definition of al-Baydawi. Imam al-Baydawi in al-Minhaj. From Bayda, from Shiraz, Iran, where there was a huge Shafi community. Massive. And al-Baydawi took this definition from a text called al-Hasil. And al-Hasil, of course, is coming from al-Razi's Mahsul. So, Mahsul, Hasil, Minhaj. It's interesting, he calls it Minhaj, and she said, right? When he says, like, hey, good job. Imam al-Razi writes what's perhaps the most important book in Usul al-Fiqh, Mu'allam fi Usul al-Fiqh. But also he wrote another book that was actually critically edited in 1977 by who? Dr. Taha Jabr al-Awani in his PhD. And it's printed by Maktabat Risala. Imagine how important that book is. Why? Because al-Mahsul of al-Razi is Razi's a genius. He's a polymath, unprecedented academic. But he's realizing, hey, the world's getting complex, man. So if you read the Risala of Imam al-Shafi, it's good, but you're like, oh, it's so simple. It's amazing. Shatta used to read it to us. But it's very simple. You read the Mahsul or the Mu'allam, you're like, I need to take logic for like 2 years and math. I need to take some social sciences. There's a lot going on here because Razi is now at the forefront of seeing the Muslim world's math. He's not changing, he's building. Right? It's important. He scales. Right? And after him comes Al-Hasil of Al-Amuri, and then after him comes Minhaj al-Baydawi. Minhaj al-Baydawi is taught in the Azhar to this time. You take it actually 8 times a week for 4 years. Tab Azim. So Imam al-Baydawi is building off those who came before him, but adding things, and he says that Usul al-Fiqh is to know the evidences generally, what constitutes evidence, and what's inferred is then to know what is not in evidence. The worst not evidence I get all the time is someone said. If I could find someone, لأمرت بقتله. The man is killing, man. And I ask people, who's someone? Because that's ambiguous. Why would the Maliki say it's not allowed to take from someone that you don't know? Dude, this happened. Someone said this, someone gave this fatwa as though someone has authority in this conversation. The unknown doesn't have authority because it's ambiguous. In this sense, it's dangerously ambiguous. So they say, no, until we know who it is, nope. And then when you push people like, well, like my aunt, we were playing PlayStation together and like, and she was like, this is the fatwa on marijuana. Right? So first is knowing what's acceptable, and then what's inferred is what's not acceptable. The acceptable evidences generally are 4 agreed upon, the rest are debated. The 4 agreed upon are Quran, Sunnah, analogy, and consensus. We say consensus than analogy, it's better. Al-Kitab wa-Sunnah, wal-Ijma' wal-Qiyas. Out of all 4, which one is not limited? Out of all the 4 evidences I just mentioned, which one is not limited? Qiyas. Qiyas هذا علاقة بين السماء والأرض. Qiyas is the relationship between the heavens and earth. Imam Haramain says Qiyas huwa taj al-fuqaha. It's the crown of the fuqaha. Ibhaj al-ulama. Because it's what allows things to continue as we try to talk about today if we have time. Analogy. We say al-maqas is a thermometer because it reflects the what? The exact temperature. So qiyas is to reflect the exact ruling on something that has no text. Marijuana and khamr. Like that. DNA evidence, use of shirt. DNA used in a court, use of shirt used as secondary evidence to prove his innocence. Secondary evidence is then allowed. That's a qiyas. It's good you react that way because you shouldn't just hear a qiyas and say, oh, okay. Why? Because there's a lot happening there. To get from that point to that point. So that's why scholars differ over a qiyas. Not as a source. Is that correct or not? Right. Then, how to use the evidence, who qualifies, and who's not qualified. So the first question is like, what's an evidence? And I phrase it in the text as Imam al-Baydawi, let's pose it as questions. What's an evidence? And what's not an evidence? A crucial function of Usul al-Fiqh is to identify acceptable proof. So when you open up a book of Usul al-Fiqh, start Kitab, Sunnah, it's going to go through the evidences. If you're Ja'fari, Ijma' al-Bayt, Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, you're going to find these different evidences. If you're Maliki, Amal Ahl-Madinah, Istishab, Istihsan, you're going to start to see all these different evidences. But the 4 agreed upon, Kitab, Sunnah, Qiyas, Ijma', except the Imamiyya, they have some differences on this issue. I'm talking now amongst the Sunnis. Kitab, Sunnah, Qiyas, Ijma'.
How do we know if this Qiyas thing is not straightforward, but the faqih, you knew how to do the analogy between, for example, marijuana and alcohol.
We'll get to it if we have time. Now we have to take the class on Usul al-Fiqh.
This one for me. How do I know that it is from other examples of the Quran or from the must that do?
Well, that's why we have to have taqleed, right? There's a point in time where you have to leave the experts. Come on. That's why what was the 4th part of Usul al-Fiqh? what's my relationship as a non-scholar to scholarship? That's why it's there. They were smart. They knew this was going to happen. Because now we find people saying, I just need to understand the logic of Dr. Taha Jabr al-Awani, Allah yarhamu, and his fatwa about this. You can't. You can't go play with LeBron. Like, why do you want to do that now? Like, suddenly, well, I studied some computer science. Well, then will you let Sheikh Taha Jabr come and tell you about, Python and C++ too? Well, there you go. So we have to appreciate there are certain things Allah hasn't commanded me to know. He's commanded me to ask. That's why I have an axiom from the Minhaj. It says, and this one makes people nervous because we think about it through a Protestant lens, a post-Reformation way of thinking, which is very anti-scholarship, anti-intellectual. We're actually happy our preacher's not trained. Now we find people in mosques saying, we're so happy we don't have any imam. What are you going to do 10 years from now when your kids don't know deen, man? What are you going to do when you start to have problems? Well, we have YouTube videos and, well then, okay, that's Cocomelon stuff, bro. But, subhanallah, listen to the axiom. أقوال العلماء عند الجهال كالأدلة عند الفقهاء. That the statements of the scholars to the untrained are like the sacred text to the trained. Because the trained, they make ijtihad, they engage the text, it's istinbat, they take rulings from it. So what do I do if I don't know? One time I called Sheikh Taha from Egypt about an issue. I called him in Egypt. I was here. And he said, so I didn't agree with it. But I appreciated it. And so I pushed in and said, Sheikh, but are you? And then he gave me, I said, then he told me his logic. I said, okay, now I see. I was trained. I know what he's talking about now. And I know Iraqi. But, Allah yarhamu, but the God is out there working hard, raising the kids. Allah hasn't commanded you to know this. It's a rahmah. So we say, أدلة أقوال العلماء عند العوام كالأدلة عند المجتهدين. And we react in a sort of a modernist, post-enlightenment colonial way. Well, we're just giving scholars too much power. No, you're thinking like Martin Luther, bro. You're thinking colonial. You're not. And we have to also address there is a way to hold scholarship accountable, ethics, morality. But academics, you just don't have to follow them. Qaddafi said, al-fatwa ghayru yulzam. The fatwa is not binding on you, but you have to ask people. So when I talk to Muslims, sometimes I say, I don't want to ask a fatwa. You know why? Because then I know I have to do it. That's Catholic Church. That's colonialism. Because Islam says what? The fatwa is rooted in clarifying the ambiguity. And because it's ambiguous, it's not binding on you. Well, what if I'm fatwa shopping? Fear Allah, you know yourself. That's not my job. This is not Animal Farm. We're not Orwellian. What about if their hearts are wrong? I don't care. Allah hasn't commanded me, shaqaqta sadara. Prophet said, you split his heart open? No, you should assume the best. So in many ways, I believe Arabic language, qira'at, and usul al-fiqh are the keys to emancipating ourselves from this garbage as best we can. And you see the reactions, there is a climate in America. Think about vaccines, whether you're for or against, I don't care. But just think about the climate of anti-intellectualism that is a benchmark of this era. And the Prophet ﷺ said, stupidity will spread. Right? So whether you could bring a very qualified physician who says, hey, vaccines are dangerous, and people won't respect it. Like, I don't have to agree with you. Or you'll bring someone that's very qualified, that's not sponsored by Big Pharma, and they say, hey, vaccines are good. The reactions are academic, they're cathartic. Islam says, look, Usul al-Fiqh says, largely Usul al-Fiqh, you know what, if you don't know, you don't know. Just ask, don't worry about how. Because you're not, that's ma kallafaka Allah bihadha. Allah didn't command you with that. So we begin in a modernist sort of exercise to stretch and strain our communities and our minds in ways that Islam is not asking us to. I don't have to take the opinion of that person, but I can ask them. I can ask someone else. The Sahaba did that. They would go to Sayyidina Umar and they would ask him, Ya Sayyidina Umar al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, what's your opinion on this? He would say this. They would go to Sayyidina Ali radiyallahu anhu and he would say, no, that's this. They would go to Sayyidina Umar and say, hey, Sayyidina Ali gave it. He said, my answer is Ali's answer. Even he changed his answer. Sometimes Sayyidina Ali would say, my answer is the answer of Aisha. So what? We lost the fluidity because secularism has made religion frozen. There's a great book you should read by Harvey Cox, PhD at Harvard, called The Secular City. I'm not saying every book I recommend, by the way, I'm not telling you I agree with everything in it, right? But the ideas generally tend to be very profound. And he argues that religion's reaction to secularism and atheism is to run and pull away from issues of morality, to pull away from issues of society. But then religious people get angry because there's no voice there to lobby on their behalf, and the space is left to who? It's the opposite. You should engage. You should push in. Like, you can't complain if there's no light there if you're not turning on the light. It's a very good text. So, Usul al-Fiqh, The Secular City, 1973 or 74, before لم تكونوا شيئا مذكورا. So the first question is, what qualifies an evidence? I want to finish quickly because of time. How do we recognize what is Usul al-Fiqh? Why Quran? Why Sunnah? So then the validity of the Quran, the validity of the Sunnah, the qira'at, this, that, blah, 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 all that, asanid, this. What's tawatur? What's not tawatur? What has the strength of being fact and the strength of being ambiguous? So they go through all that. Quran, Sunnah, Ijma', Qiyas. In the first book. Second book, we go through those that are different over. The second question is how to use evidences, and that's where most people get it wrong. Everyone has access to evidences. USC has the entire canon of hadith online, man. It's not hard. Now you have even all the qira'ats translated online. You can access them, search them. If you speak Arabic, Maktabat Shamila. Everything's there. Now AI, there are people making an AI shit. There are. It's going to answer everything you need. So recognizing the evidence is crucial. It's not enough because anybody can do that. Usul al-Fiqh provides the rules and axioms and methods that govern their application. I'll give one example. We gave a lot. For example, the hadith, the dog licks a vessel, washes 7 times the first time with dirt. إذا ولغ الكلب في إناء أحدكم فاغسله 7 مرات أولاهن بتراب. رواه الترمذي. Hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. You know who narrates also this hadith? Imam Malik. But Imam Malik doesn't act on it. Subhanallah. See these imams contradicting the Quran and Sunnah. They even narrate it in their own muwatta, but they don't act on it. This is why we should get rid of rijal wa nahnu rijal, la antum iyal. Right? So this is where the modernist destructive, I want to rip everything apart. I want to leave it in chaos. This need to be Jordan at the free throw line with your tongue out against your fellow Muslims is a gift of this society. It's very aggressive. If you ever lived overseas, you probably were shocked to see, like, people don't have guns. Right? People don't feel threatened by other humans because America is a country which is based on carnality and killing of people, the murdering of people. The blood is in the soil right here in Virginia. So consequently, the outcome of that is you're going to be paranoid. It's a historical. If there is the trauma of slavery found in black people to this day, there is also the fear of white people because of the crimes they committed against humanity. You will find it in our DNA. And that's why law and order, it tends to mean what? For everybody but you know who? My folks. Of course, I became Muslim. That kind of went out the window. But people will say, like, how could Imam Malik narrate this? Gosh darn it, he's going against it. Do I want to be on the way of the Salaf al-Saleh or, neoliberalism? These imams are all male, all these male patriarchy, garbage, throw it out the window. I'm going to make my own ijtihad. Why am I a kafir now? Why have I lost my deen? These are extremes, reactions. But the large one is, how could Malik narrate this, not act on it? Because the Malikis have a rule, al-a'malu aqwa min al-aqwal. Because Abu Hurairah didn't act on it. So if Abu Hurairah narrated it and didn't act on it, then that means it's what? It's not an issue of ibadah, nor is it an order. It's just, hey, wash your plates. Oh man, I didn't understand the methodology of Malik. That's the problem. And that's why we say scholars, when they argue based on usul. Ignorant people, when they argue based on evidences. So they have the usul, they don't have kayfiyat istidlal. So that's why when you read those books, you're like, wow, this is layered. This is deeper than I thought it was. It's not sloppy. I'm not trying to call anyone out for having certain slants towards certain things. I'm talking about in their extremist forms. I'll be Salafi, fine. I don't think all the Muslims' problems in the world reductively are because of Salafis. That's garbage. Got a lot of other problems besides the Salafis. Same thing with women who feel, the grips of patriarchy. They got a right to feel that way. But the extremes of rejecting religion or rejecting scholarship or having bad su'ul dhan with everybody, tasweedul haya, tumitul haya, that's the problem. So Malik did not deny the dalil, the asl. He differed with his meaning. Why? Because Abu Hurairah didn't act on it. Why would Abu Hurairah say that? فَلْيَغْسِلْهُ هَذَا لَمْ أَمْرٍ. He must wash his dish. So then I say, you know what? This is irshad. Prophet, you know it's better to clean your dishes, man. That's what Ibn Rushd said. If it was an issue of worship, why is it 7 times? It should be once. So it's like, in order to be healthy, to be clean. Dogs, we see people here, unfortunately, giving their dogs ice cream and they lick after them. It's not a healthy thing, man. فَلْيَغْسِلْهُ سَبْعَ مَرَّاتٍ. Is Malik acting on his own? Or is he saying, Sayyidina Abu Hurairah, his actions contradicted the statement. And the madhab, we have a principle. It says, al-a'malu aqwa min al-riwayat wal-aqwal. That the actions of the rawi are given precedent over what he or she said.
See how they Tarawi.
It's because they're the one narrated it. And it's Sahabi, specifically the Sahaba. Not anyone else in the Ruwats. The Sahabi is not acting on what they narrated. We know it's not wajib. It's not fard. Because there's no way he would act against it. Understand now? The method. That's not in the text. Where do you get that from? The manhaj. Absolutely. In some situations, absolutely, yeah. It's not across the board, but a lot. So here we understand it, not the hadith to me you have to do it, it's recommended.
This is not the case now. The saying something in action.
And also this is unique to the madhab. I'm not saying every madhab has this. But specifically Malik, yeah. Others also, but example I'm giving. That takes us, as we finish, to the next component of Usul al-Fiqh. Who qualifies? The one who knows all that? Everything we just went through. Largely, a scholar of Usul al-Fiqh should have what? Theology, of course. The whole thing is for Allah. Number 2, Arabic language. Has to have Arabic. Scholars say we never saw a faqih who didn't know Arabic. Never saw a Suli who didn't know Arabic. And know it well. So that's why at Azhar, in the College of Islamic Law, for 4 years we did adab, we did al-adab. All them poets, man, all that poetry, all the words, like, what on earth is this? It's shawshab, shawshab. Grow the grass. Kalimat ghariba. Shawshab al-ard, the grass is coming out. Shawshabat al-ard. But this mean, man, these manzumat, بفعل الفعل ذو جزرية أو فعل يأتي ومكسورة إن عين أو فاء ولا فالضم من فعل لازم في المضارع يفتح. Nobody understands that stuff, man. And here's the modernist reaction. I don't need scholarship to this. Well, then, buy Felicia. Buy faqih. Because buy faqih. Because that again is very, to reject everything. Doesn't mean we can't be critical of scholarly tradition. Doesn't mean we can't look at it constructively. Of course, they would actually want us to do that, as Ibn Khaldun talks about, as Ibn Malik talks about. But just to reject your ancestors, man, completely everything they did, that's ridiculous. That's especially when it's so well done, right? And that's why I always laugh. I see people on YouTube. I'm the first one to ever discover this. Run, unless it's been peer reviewed. Run. Because you sitting at home eating hot Cheetos, drinking strawberry pop, being raised by your mama for 40 years and never getting married, now you think you're the faqih of the ummah, bro? I'm sorry, bro. I ain't taking their red pill. And so we can't separate the impact of society on us and how we think. That's why they say the faqih ya'rif biyatahu. وَيَعْرِفْ أَنَّهُ ibn biyatihi. Right? The jurist, he or she knows, I'm the daughter or the son of my era. So I got to be aware of what's going on here. What are the negatives? What are the positives? What are the... So the next, what are the qualifications? So number 1, theology. Number 2, Arabic language. Arabic language, 33 sciences. More or less someone should be at least familiar with, but of course the foundation is sort of rhetoric, right? grammar, also what's called ilm al-lugha, the meanings of words. They should be exposed to a rich literary reading of Arabic. So as I remember in high school, we started reading Khalil Gibran Khalil. And some brothers like, man, this dude's a kafir. I read this kafir. And Abu Ilya al-Madi, the Lebanese. Ilya Abu Madi, the Mahjureen. Right? These people who were poets, they were not Muslim. They came to America. They're called the Muhajirun, right? I remember this brother's like, these people is kuffar. The professor said, look, you gotta understand ideas, man. You gotta engage. You know, you gotta be aware. And then he said to this guy, you go to college of Islamic law, man, your language has to be rich. You can't just be no, you have to be, and he said, especially the ajanib. I love these, especially you non-Arabs. You're really, so we read Najib Mahfouz in Azhar. Even though his ideas, we read Immanuel Kant in Arabic. I was like, Kant, who is this Immanuel Kant? I can't read it. Yeah? I said, wow, we're reading this dude. Because they want you to have kind of a wide open mind, but more importantly, a rich experience of the language. And after that, logic, mantiq, you take mantiq for 4 years, 5 years. There's a great poem called Usul by Imam al-Akhdari. Shaykh Taha would agree with me on this. Not a fan of mantiq, but I'll say, look, Sheikh, you studied it, that's why you became who you became. You can't deny that. He said, it's not fair. I said, no, but you studied it, like, you know. Like not everyone can arrive to where you are, like, without that. So studying mantiq helps us. We say, mantiq lil-adhan ka-nahu lil-lisan. Mantiq is for your mind like grammar is for your tongue. How do I think correctly? And then, of course, sociology is a lot of there. History, appreciation of Usul al-Fiqh now has become very interdisciplinary, not in the sense of impacting the adillah, but the person should be aware of things. That's why Imam Ahmed always asked, who's a faqih? What are the conditions? He said, one is what? Ma'rifatun nas. You know people. So it answers that. And then the last question that it answers is the relationship between a non-scholar and a scholar. That's a very important relationship. We had all this set up, 700 to 600 years before the Reformation. People rebelled against the power of the Catholic Church, the Inquisitors. Right? This was set in place because it understood that with religious education comes power. But also ignorant people have power too. You see now, ignorant people have become scholars. Scholars have become stupid. As Abu Ala says, فَلَمَّا رَأَيْتُ جَهْلَ فَاشِيًا تَعْلَمْتُ حَتَّى يُقَالُ أَنِّي جَاهِلٌ. Abu Ala says, when I saw stupidity became popular, I learned until the popular people called me stupid. That means I'm smart. If dumb people call you dumb, what does that mean? You're probably intelligent. So what is the relationship between the scholar and the non-scholar? That is not binding. The opinion isn't binding unless it's a judgment. Qada, it's different. Al-fatwa, ijtihad. These are issues don't follow under munkar. What is an obligation for a layperson? When? And how do they consult a scholar? What do they have to know? We talked about that briefly. What is the purpose of law? What are madhahib? Are madhabs binding? Do you have to have a madhab? What is taqleed? What are the limitations of taqleed? How do I do taqleed correctly? How do I answer questions correctly? Kayfa tufti? Is allowed to give a fatwa. I learned this from Shaykh Taha. To the whole world, one fatwa for everybody, that's impossible. Rarely you have fatwa am. Usually fatwa khas. What are the types of fatwa? Are they binding? We had talked about it. Is a non-specialist expected to know the reasons of the fatwa? Question you asked me earlier, it's right here. So in this book, we go through this. That's in front of you. I'm going to teach this book actually online for free in YouTube in September. This book in front of you. Khalas, on Tuesday evening, I think at 9:30 p.m. or 9 p.m. That's free. Just jump online. YouTube or Facebook. We'll advertise it. The advertisement's out already. So based on the above, Imam al-Dawi defines Usul al-Fiqh as what? Ma'rifatu dala'il. Actually, dala'il is the wrong Arabic usage. I don't want to talk about it now. It should be ma'rifatu adillah, but he put dala'il, so I'm quoting him. Al-Fiqh ijmalan. To generally know what constitutes an evidence, an admissible evidence into law. وكيفية استفادة منها أي من هذه الأدلة. How do you benefit from these evidence? وحال المستفيد المستفيد الأدلة. And then what are the qualifications of the one who brings benefit, the scholar? We'll stop here, inshallah, next time. There's no next time, but there's a lot more to cover, but this is just the introduction. So what does Usul al-Fiqh do? Negotiates ambiguity. Well, it gives the rules for those who negotiate ambiguity. It gives the rules, reasons, methodologies, principles for those who have to negotiate what's a ruling. So it's like the ref. It's the compliancy officer. That's a good word, right? It's Michael Scott, but a good version, right? Steps in and says, this is wrong or this is wrong. No. So it's almost like peer review, right? So Usuli will look at your fatwa and be like, nope, you forgot this, right? So it's like a compliancy kind of thing. Traditionally, and when I teach fiqh, I don't separate it from, I teach Usul al-Fiqh and fiqh together. I don't like this separation because I think it creates this duality that's not healthy. So it provides the rules, methodology, principles, and sources of evidence for those who have to negotiate ambiguity, meaning the ruling on an issue. After that, we said it's put into 4 sort of foundations. Number 1 is what's an evidence. 2, how to use it. Number 3, the scholar. Number 4, the non-scholar. And then all in between, we talked about a lot of stuff. So barakallahu feekum. We have any questions? We can take them now. Yes, ma'am.
What the difference between adil and dalail?
لا هو قال الدلائل هذا لا it's not acceptable because dalail is not the plural of dalil. The plural of dalil is adillah. That's a long discussion in Sarf. But it doesn't take anything. He's a human being. خلاص. People make mistakes. Yes, ma'am. So the marijuana issue, I think one of the things that's happened in the last 50, 60 years was Imam Ibn Ashur. It's kind of the generation 2 before Sheikh Taha, and before them you have Sheikh Muhammad Abdu, Sheikh Rashid Rida, but also you have scholars that don't agree with the Imam Abdu and Rashid Rida, who came out of like India and other places. You had fiqh councils created. Like I'm part of the North American Fiqh Council. I just stepped away from the executive board because it's just too much work, man. Ittihad al-Ulama al-Alami, which was led by Dr. Yusuf Qaradawi, part of that. So I tell people, take these questions. They've already been answered there. Take answers from fiqh councils. That way you could tell this 14-year-old young person's like, well, like it's grown from the earth and like it like helps me sleep at night. You can say, well, that's great, but here's a fiqh council of like 500 scholars and medical professionals and here's their opinion. All the reasons that person gave you are not acceptable. The only time that we're, permitting people to use medical marijuana is like bone cancer, malaprotectors, right? Severe pain, opioids. And that's based on conversations with doctors and physicians. Also psychosomatic issues, trauma, where there's no alternatives. But if you're like 14, 15 years old, I believe that one of the goals of secular society, and this is not to undermine anyone, is that it's made mental health for everything. Right? And that's how you undermine again religion. Now the sheikh has no role. But we have the opposite, right? We have Muslims who are like everything's a jinn. It's kind of the reaction to that, right? Where the less than 3% of the Sahaba had jinn. Now 97% of the Muslims have jinn. How's that possible? And it's not to demean anyone. It's just saying, it's not to make fun of people. It's concerning, man. Right? So the explosion of mental health for everything. Also, like what happened to the idea of being, sort of having a sense of resolve, pushing through. This is not to dismiss people that have serious issues, but they're giving out drugs now. I remember I was in New York City, and it was before they allowed recreational marijuana. There will actually be signs saying, I'm a doctor, come talk to me, I'll get you weed. And just come talk to me, I'll get you weed. Like, Chipotle didn't have brown rice, man. My life's over here. Smoke some weed.
But we have a larger issue. I mean, the ruling is one. But now it's pervasive. It's pervasive. So it's to the point where like some of my daughter's friends now have marijuana medical cards.
Absolutely.
And they go to the dispensaries. And so if they got the card. So now what they're doing is that they're sharing.
And they sell it, yeah.
Yeah, and they're selling, exactly. So it's now become a business.
We have young Muslim women on OnlyFans. OnlyFans. Young Muslims on OnlyFans. There's like a pornographic website.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're making money.
Yeah,
$5,000, $10,000 a week. Not a lot, but a few.
So for me, it's heartbreaking for me because it's like I said, it's in my face. I see it every day. regularly. And then also at the state level, I'm also a public servant for the state of Maryland. And so that